The silent witness. It was a crisp autumn morning in the bustling city of Cleveland, Ohio, when Amina Williams found herself once again making the long commute to her job at St. Michael's Hospital. The leaves crunched beneath the heels of her boots as she walked, trying to ignore the gnawing sense of dread that had been weighing on her for weeks. It wasn't the work itself. Amina had always been passionate about her job as a registered nurse, dedicated to providing care for the sick and injured. But in the past few months, something had shifted at the hospital. Rumors swirled, subtle but undeniable, that some of the staff felt uncomfortable with the increasing diversity in the workplace. She could see it in the eyes of some patients when she walked into their rooms, those furtive glances, the slight shift in posture. But what bothered her most was the change she felt among her colleagues. Specifically, the icy treatment from her senior nurse. Linda Hayes. Linda had been working at St. Michael's for over 20 years, and everyone knew her reputation. She was tough but fair, at least. That's how she was once described. However, over the past few months, Linda had become colder and more distant towards Amina. Amina brushed it off at first, telling herself that maybe Linda was just stressed. But then came the moments, small at first, but growing more blatant with each passing day. Linda would snap at her for the smallest mistakes, criticize her work with unnecessary cruelty, and worst of all, make passive-aggressive comments that seemed to have no purpose other than to belittle her. Amina couldn't help but notice the others around her. No one stood up for her. They all seemed to look the other way. It was like they were afraid of crossing Linda, afraid of the power she seemed to hold over them. But Amina wasn't the type to stay quiet. She tried talking to Linda once, after an especially cruel incident in the break room. But Linda just smirked and told her she was too sensitive. "Maybe you're just not cut out for this work, Amina," Linda had said with a sneer. "Maybe some people just aren't meant to be here." The words stung, but Amina refused to let them break her. She had been through too much in her life to let a racist nurse get to her. She knew her worth, and she knew she was good at what she did. But it wasn't just the bullying that hurt. It was the fact that Linda's actions were slowly starting to chip away at Amina's sense of belonging at St. Michael's. She felt like an outsider in the very place she had worked for years. And that feeling of being invisible, of being less than, was something Amina wasn't sure how much longer she could bear. One rainy evening, after another particularly hostile exchange with Linda, in which she had been told she wasn't fast enough during a critical procedure, Amina decided it was time to take control of her life. She packed her things, told her supervisor she needed a break, and left the hospital early, not even bothering to change out of her scrubs. She drove aimlessly, letting the rain blur her vision, her thoughts clouded with frustration and anger. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her mother, just checking in, as usual. But Amina didn't respond. She didn't feel like talking to anyone. She just needed space to think. It wasn't until she pulled over at a small park by the lake, the sound of the water slapping against the shore, calming her nerves, that she began to realize how deep the hurt went. Her whole life, she had been taught to fight through adversity, to rise above. But this was different. Linda's words weren't just attacks on her abilities. They were attacks on her identity, on the very essence of who she was as a Black woman in a predominantly white industry. Amina had always been proud of her heritage. Her parents had taught her the value of resilience and strength. But at that moment, she felt anything but strong. She felt exhausted. As the rain began to lighten, Amina turned on the radio, hoping the music would soothe her mind. But before she could even adjust the volume, the song playing caught her attention. The lyrics spoke of finding one's voice, of standing tall in the face of adversity. It was a reminder, a wake-up call, that she was more than what Linda had said to her. Determined not to let the negativity fester, Amina returned home that evening and spent hours on the phone with friends, some from work, some from her past. They all listened patiently as she vented her frustrations, and they all offered words of encouragement. But it wasn't until she spoke with her grandmother that Amina realized what she needed to do. "You can't let them win, child," her grandmother said, her voice steady and strong despite her age. "They want you to feel small, to feel like you're invisible. But you know who you are. You walk with purpose. Don't let anyone take that from you." The next morning, Amina returned to the hospital, not as the broken woman who had left the night before, but as someone who knew exactly what she had to do. She walked into the nurse's station with her head held high, her shoulders squared, and a newfound sense of resolve in her heart. Linda was there, sitting at her desk as usual. Amina felt the weight of her gaze, but she didn't flinch. She didn't need to. She walked past Linda and to her assigned area with quiet confidence, making it clear that she wasn't afraid anymore. The entire ward seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Linda, sensing that something had changed in Amina, watched her for a moment before getting up and walking over. "Amina," Linda began, her tone softer than it had been in weeks. Before she could say another word, Amina turned to face her, her eyes sharp and unwavering. "I'm done with this," Amina said, her voice steady. "I'm done letting you and anyone else make me feel less than. If you can't treat me with respect, I won't work with you anymore. Do you understand?" Linda's face faltered, but she said nothing. She simply nodded, her pride and defensiveness waning in the face of Amina's calm strength. The change didn't happen overnight, but from that moment on, Amina carried herself with a quiet but undeniable authority. She became the voice for those who couldn't speak up, the one who stood tall when others shrank back. And as the days passed, Linda's coldness softened into something resembling respect, though it would never be friendship. But for Amina, it didn't matter. She had already won. Not just against Linda, but against every barrier life had thrown at her. Amina knew that sometimes it wasn't the battles you fought that defined you. It was how you chose to stand in the face of them. And in that quiet park by the lake, amidst the rain and the music, Amina had found herself again. And this time, no one could take that away.